You're listening to the Fooled by the Root podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Heidi Marble. Oh my goodness, this is such an emotional day for me to finally be back behind the microphone after 8 months of being on a healing odyssey with my heart. I have to tell you, my beautiful audience, I have missed you so deeply, and it feels so momentous to be here with 4 incredible women. I don't know why I said 4. I guess I included myself. But I have Vicky and Barb and Stephanie Joy Pipes, who is our creative director. I'm going to tell you more about everyone who's here. But first and foremost, I want you to know that this is a huge step forward. Pulled by the Root is absolutely our passion. We want to continue to tell your stories, and I appreciate your patience. And we are going to do one podcast at a time, one step at a time. And I hope that my experience through my healing journey can also help you access your healing journey. So I want to introduce you to our incredible guests. I got a submission, and one of the things that stood out about the submission, Vicky, was when you said, "I do not see myself as a victim, but rather the hero of my own journey." That was so powerful to me, and I knew I needed to know you more. So Barbara Bazett and Vicky Graham, a birth mother and a daughter separated by adoption in reunion for nearly 30 years. Everyone loves a happy ending, mother and daughter becoming best friends, but they had a rough start. It took decades to get real. Special needs adoptee Vicky was grateful to be rescued from the orphanage, but she did not know her origin story was a lie. After years of searching, birth mother Barbara found Vicky, her secret baby, and the intensity of their connection was shocking. The healing bond between mother and child remained. Barbara and Vicky continued to work together, creating a podcast, writing a book, and collaborating on healing meditations. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see you. Before we get into your story, I want to tell our audience about the behind the scenes. The two of you, and I'm already going to start crying.
Go ahead.
Through this journey have offered so much love and support. And one of the ways that you did that is you offered me a healing session where I had healing singing through Barb, whose voice is just so angelic. It just moved my soul. It was so beautiful, Barb. I just want to say thank you for that gift. And Vicky, you're just incredible talent to help bring me into a peaceful state, and the meditation and the beautiful singing bowl. I would just highly encourage anyone who is suffering to seek out all of the ways that you can heal and how we can heal in community and help heal each other. That came at a time that was so important for me. I was so vulnerable, and I just want to thank you so much for the gifts that you bring to the world.
That's so lovely. It was our honor. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I am so excited for our audience to hear your incredible journey, and an incredible journey it is. So I'm going to sit back here with my ice water. I'm going to let you girls go for it, and I will pipe in with some questions.
Well, should we start at the beginning or start where we met? What do you think, Vicky?
Well, I don't know. They always say begin in the middle.
So, that's right.
I'd like to say I'm Vicky. I'm an adoptee, and I'm the one that submitted that, to you, Heidi. And I'm really glad that you liked what I wrote. I think that being adopted has been one of the defining things about my life, and I didn't realize it until I was in reunion, because I always thought that the big thing about me was that I was born with a birth defect and that no one wanted me. And so that was what I thought who I was. And the adoption was just wrapped up in all of that. And so I can't believe how healing the reunion has been for me on so many layers. So I think that's been, I now know that's really the story of my life, is to be found. So thank you for finding me.
Yes.
mommy.
Wow.
And I just realized I've decided to start calling her mommy instead of just Barb.
I love
So
that.
Thank you, Vicky. Yeah. I searched for Vicky for 4 years. This was prior to the internet. Everything was on microfiche, and the state where she was born had just announced that they were going to allow people to ask for their records, but it still was really difficult. I wrote letters to the judge, letters to the agency, and was ignored for a year until I found a search partner and a search agency. It was a not-for-profit group, but they helped each other and new people find others in the adoption triad. And they taught me the key words to use to get the judge to feel safe giving me non-identifying information, the words to say to the agency so that they would release the social worker's notes to me. So it was long, it was involved, and it was actually a blessing that it took 4 years because I was in therapy that whole time. And opening up that possibility, searching for my daughter, opened me up, and I became that 19-year-old unmarried pregnant girl. And my world was so shaken that thank God for therapy, thank God for the search taking so long. I was able to work on myself and deal with emotions that I had buried for almost 30 years, not speaking my secret, no one knowing, afraid to be honest or real with anyone at work or outside that I knew casually, because I was certain if they knew who I was and what I had done, they wouldn't want to have anything to do with me. So, and I think that's very typical of birth mothers. There's a lot of shame and guilt, and it's good for us to shake that off, to let it see the light of day, because it's from a very old Victorian attitude that needs to go away. So I found Vicky through microfiche and found her parents' names, and she was 30 years old. So I thought, okay, if I contact her, it's not inappropriate. She's not a child anymore. And my first contact with her was a phone call.
yeah.
Out of the blue.
Yes.
What was that like for you, Vicky?
Oh, it's funny. It was like being hit with a brick wall. It was completely unexpected. It was something that I think I'd fantasized about, but I never really thought would happen, to be honest. I never thought I'd meet her. I certainly knew I would never look for her because she rejected me. And that was my life story, was that she didn't want me because I was born with a cleft lip and palate. So that's why she gave me up. So that's what I'd been told over and over and over. So she was really the villain in my life story. And so when she came just rushing in, I didn't trust her. I didn't believe her. I said and did all the right things because I was a very compliant adoptee who'd been taught to be polite and a good girl. And I think on a very deep level, I was terrified she would leave again. So I was afraid to say anything wrong. But underneath it was a deep resentment and rage, I think, that kept me from believing this woman that kept telling me she loved me. And I just didn't believe it at all. Not in the slightest.
So that was obviously the rough start that you're talking about. So
Yeah.
So take us through how this bond, because it's obviously very significant.
Yeah.
Can you build the story more for us about how you were able to bridge that gap and be able to trust each other and find this very precious relationship?
Yeah. I think she was so consistently loving, consistently open, that it softened me. It softened me. I was also lucky that my adoptive parents were supportive, because that was my first fear, was that they would reject me. And so I was really just taking care of everyone but me, because I didn't believe I had any needs that needed to be taken care of. Sound familiar, Heidi?
Sounds very familiar.
What needs? I have
What
to take
needs?
care
Oh,
of
those.
all
Oh,
of
yeah.
So I was busy spinning a lot of plates for other people for a long, long time, but she never went away. She kept staying in my life. She was sweet and kind and vulnerable and open, and just slowly was like water to the parched. It just slowly just got in through the cracks and the crevices, and I slowly softened and became more and more open. And it took a long time. And it took a long time for me to even tell her how I really felt. Many, many, many years. We were lucky though. Like she said, we didn't live near each other. We had a spaciousness to our relationship. There was letters exchanged, photos, back and forth over months that turned into years. And that was really helpful, because it gave us time to go off and be apart and sort of settle in and then come back together. And for us, that was really helpful.
Yeah.
And Barb, what was your experience during that time? I'm sure after finding her, you probably desperately just wanted to just have her close to you, to have to.
Oh, well, the first time we met was, the only thing I can describe it as is falling in love with someone. It was the honeymoon period, basically. I was just glowing, and she felt like my newborn baby that I never got to hold. We were, even though she distrusted me, she was also consistent. I mean, even when she was pushing me away out of concern for her parents, she did it kindly. And thank God I'd had therapy for 4 years. I understood from my therapist that it was going to take her time to adjust, just as it had for me. And so I think I was a little in the fog. I was very much in love. She could do no wrong in my eyes. And I also was very patient. But even though Vicky didn't trust me, she didn't let on. She was always consistent and there as well. Even she'd call to say, I want you to back off. I want to talk to my parents. This is too much for me. But yeah, we talked for 2 hours on the phone.
I do
Talk about mixed messages there, huh?
So
Yeah, well.
I took heart in that, and I took heart in the fact that we visited back and forth up and down the coast of California for years, several times a year. So even though it was very hard after a while being together, because we felt that tension, we loved each other anyway. I don't know how else to describe it. Or at least I felt the love was there and the bond was there, even if we didn't quite know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to ask a few questions here before we progress more into your relationship. So I think some of the things that you pointed out that are so important is seeking reunion is a very scary thing. And I think a lot of us go into it without the therapy, Barb, and without all this. And we've talked about this a lot on the podcast.
Yeah.
That boy, it is a lot to navigate. It requires a lot of bravery. And I think the fact, Vicky, that one of the points that you made is that you had been, what you were told was not true. So what was true, Barb? Like, what truth did you learn, Vicky, that probably helped heal your heart? Because your impression was you were given away because of this disability.
Right.
So like, how did that play out? Because I think that's, something to really, that would ache to hold that. And then to be able to release that would be brilliant.
Yeah. It's interesting because when she told me that, I think, and it shaped my identity so strongly that I went through, like, I felt like I was in free fall, because if that's not who I am, who am I? So that was, it was funny, even though it was a bad thing. The idea was that my parents were the only ones who loved me enough to want me. So I didn't know how to reconcile all of that. But Barb wanted me to know. And so she sent me the records that said that she had wanted me to prove it to me, which was a double-edged sword, because it also revealed that other families had backed out.
Oh, wow.
So even though she wanted me, I was rejected by others.
So you were just tossed up in this emotional,
it was tricky
upheaval.
Yeah. And it took me years to talk to Barb about that, how much, unfortunately, that was really hurtful to find that out.
Yeah. It was decades before you told me.
I know.
and this is typical of our empathy for one another. Vicky very carefully told me this, and she was the one who held me while I bawled over and over and over for good 10, 20 minutes, realizing that I had hurt her. So it hurt her to hurt me, and it hurt me to hurt her. And it goes in a circle, a spiral sometimes. Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that's so important to discuss, that a lot of people don't consider when they think about adoption. It's just how tangled and complicated. And it's really a lifetime process of healing and going through different emotions during different phases. I'm sure you can relate to all of that. So I'm curious about this incredible bond and banter that you guys have with each other that feels so natural, and how you got into this healing work. And I don't want to skip too far ahead, but maybe if you can catch us up to where you are now, because it's really beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I was always told that my birth mother was musical, and so my parents always played lots of records for me, but I never played an instrument. In fact, it's sad, they tried me out on the song flute, which was the only shot I had in public education at the time. But with my oral motor problems from my cleft, there was no way I could play the song flute, and so I was never given another chance with an instrument. But it's been interesting, kind of, when I met Barb. She's a musician and she does all this work, and I think some of it's in my blood, that doing, and maybe my instrument is my voice in a different way. All the speech therapy I had growing up, and being a physical therapist doing healing work, it's just sort of led me to do the meditations and things. But I'd love to turn it over to you to talk about how you've come to your musical healing.
Mine was a complicated route. My mother was my music teacher. She brought me the gift of music, but she was a bit of a narcissist, and her teaching method was kind of rough. So music has been in and out of my life. I grew up with her value of performance, perfection, competition, anxiety. And I had to throw that away for a while, and find that music. I think I first found out that it's not competitive, and you can appreciate the other people's voices and talents and abilities. And I think that was the first step of seeing that and having that modeled and recognizing that. And then finally to find Threshold Choir, which is all about song as healing. And there is no ego. It's outside of your ego. It's conveying something in a loving and healing way. And so that was very healing for me as well. And it was also a way that I can use my voice, which is, even though I have a voice that kind of was attuned to singing classical music or opera, that was not where my heart was. And my voice is one that conveys emotion, I think, rather than being a performing voice. And so I feel like it uses my simple gift of feeling through song and can do what you can with it. So that's my journey to get away from that other use.
And if I can
And then-
circle back, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and how did this combine? Because I can't imagine as mother and daughter, because tell everyone where you live.
Well, I live in Australia.
Yeah.
and I live in California.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
what a way to be able to connect and to give
Yeah.
back. So I just love to
Yeah.
know more about that.
So I would, to circle back, the kind of the intellectual route a little bit. So I was in an institution as an infant. I had a lot of surgeries with my cleft lip and palate. And so I always felt called to the medical profession. I became a physical therapist and my specialty was trauma. The messier and more life-threatening, the better. So I really loved working with people who had major trauma. And it just felt like a calling my whole life. And so as my own childhood trauma, being a trauma specialist, and then being in reunion and in therapy and learning about how all of this is interwoven into pre-verbal trauma and the body keeps the score and all of that, especially after co-authoring a textbook on neuroscience and realizing that we wrote a 10-chapter book on the nervous system, and 9.5 chapters are about the subconscious. It's really amazing. It is such a tiny part of who we are, our conscious mind. Almost everything happens unconsciously. And all those years as a physical therapist, and all my patients had pain and trauma all woven together. It just made me really want to know more about how to help people. And so this feels like it's coalesced everything that it's like my reason for being is to help other people with their wounded child, their inner trauma. And I love doing it with my mommy because I think our voices are really similar. And we both had this, pulled by the root, to use your podcast, beautiful image and metaphor. We were both traumatized by that experience. It wasn't just one of us. It's a shared trauma. And so taking that and turning it into healing for others is healing us too.
Oh, Vicky, so beautifully said. And that's a great segue, because I think we need to, at this point in the interview, also dive into some of the things we talked about off camera, which were, kind of inclusivity, that the trauma, there's enough trauma to go around. Yeah. And I think when we're hurt, we want to blame. And I could just point to myself because it's just easier. My birth mom left me and my adopted mom didn't understand. And it gets very, very complicated. But I think one thing that's important for us at Pulled by the Root is to have an inclusivity of ideas and thoughts from all sides. And I know there's a lot of heat toward birth mothers in particular, natural mothers, and a lot of heat toward adopted parents. But my thought process after doing this for a little while here is I almost feel like it's the system taking advantage of vulnerable parties.
Yeah.
And, we can
Absolutely.
argue, of course, the baby is the most vulnerable. So I'd like to say, yeah, we win because we have absolutely zero choice in what's happening. But I think it would be really interesting to hear, some of the perspectives that we shared about, because we do deserve a chance to tell our story. We do deserve to be angry. There's a lot of hurt here, a lot of things that need to be worked through. But what I love about what you said is, I don't want to be a victim. I want to be a hero of my story. Like we have to, gosh, I just want that for people. And I want that for myself as well, to move out of that. And so I'm rambling here, but I would really love to hear both of your perspectives, having been in reunion for so long and in this community for so long. What are some of your thoughts about what's going right and what's going wrong? What do you think we need to do? So much.
Well, thank you. I love, when you look at the primal wound, and you had her on your podcast a couple episodes ago. What a great interview. Wow.
Yeah.
I love her.
Yeah, absolutely. What did you say, Barb? She wrote the seminal work. Really.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
the whole idea, though, I've been really looking at this too, is the whole idea that we are in the triangle is the adoptee. There's the, the victim, the hero, and the rescuer. Right? No, am I right? Did I get all
Sounds
three?
good to me.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, so we have to have a villain. So we have to have a villain and a hero, right?
Mhm.
And I don't think that as the baby we are in the triangle. We are in the center of the triangle because we're the thing passed around. So I think we need to even look at our role in the triangle. We're not in the triangle. We're not in one of the decision-making places as the baby. We're the thing. We're the widget.
That is so powerful. I
We
feel that.
so when we come out of the fog, we have to go into the role of victim. It's the only place where we can enter initially to feel our pain, to cry, to nurse our wounds. We have to crawl away and be sad. But then that's not a place I want to stay. And that's why I no longer see myself as a victim. I am the hero because I'm now in a functional triangle. I am the hero of my own story. There is no more victim or rescuer. I rescue myself. And I think, Barb, you had something really nice to say about the kind of the roles of the two mothers.
Well, yeah. I think when adoptees, I see a lot of adoptees who come out of the fog and they've always believed their adoptive parents were the rescuer, the birth parents were the villains who threw them away. And then when they are in reunion and meet those people, they can't see them as villains anymore. They hear their story. Some may start thinking the adoptive parents are the villains because you have to shift it all. I think she said in her book that was part of the natural process of reunion, but reunion is probably the best healing for all of us. And it's hearing each other's stories. And like you said, Vicky, not being a victim, hearing that we were all manipulated, as you said, Heidi, by something that in its purest form should have been to rescue children who were completely alone and needed rescuing. And it's become a business,
Right.
that perpetuates trauma by continuing. It's not in its pure form in any way now.
No, and it
So-
commodifies grief on so many levels.
All levels.
And that's where I think the adoptive parents, I have so much compassion because their grief is commodified. They don't get counseling for their infertility. They don't get, I don't think, enough education and training on how challenging it is to parent someone else's baby who's been so traumatized.
Yeah, and I think to speak to all of those points, because people that listen to the podcast know the greatest heartache of my life was the destruction of my relationship with my adopted mom when I sought out my birth family, and all the guilt and shame that goes along with that, and all the wasted time. It just felt so tragic to me, and I think that's on repeat for so many people.
Yeah.
Reunion. I think it's fairly rare that it turns out to be as positive experience as the two of you have, sadly. And I know that you have had your own complications. So I feel that by having these conversations and speaking out and talking about it, and hopefully people will listen, and through that education and understanding, there's a broader scope for people to, see that this doesn't necessarily have to be threatening. If you're an adopted person, you come with two sets of situations. That's just part of being adopted. And to have that erasure or not have that part acknowledged, it's very, very painful. And so many of us have lived through that. So I just want to say thank you to the two of you for being willing to share your ideas and thoughts about that as well. And what do you see as like the ultimate, if you could, bring everybody in a room together, society, and because everyone has such a different view, like what do you think you would want people to know? Kind of like a headline, I guess.
Yeah. Can I go first with
Sure.
one piece?
Yeah.
I want to speak from my lived experience as a special needs adoptee. And this is something that I think there's so much pain. There's not that many special needs adoptees out there talking. And I think that that there was so much harm caused by this curated story about me not being wanted and then my parents wanting me. It was begun by the social worker, the adoption agency. And I just think if adoptive parents and even agencies could think about when you have a child who's special needs, not focusing on how many people didn't want them before. The international adoptees who are told they found you in a ditch, they found you in a trash bin, no one wanted you, you were in an orphanage. It doesn't help anything.
No.
And I just wish people would really think about that, the harm that's caused. It doesn't elevate the adoptive parent. It only diminishes the child's ego and self-love, at least in my experience.
Yeah,
absolutely. I wish there would be more support for families to keep their children. I think I read somewhere that 60% of adoptions come out of foster care now. So if that money were put into keeping families together, we would have a whole lot less trauma from separating babies at birth. And I think adult adoptees should have access to their medical records and their family history. That's just insane that adults can't find out who they are and have access. So there's a whole lot of work that needs to be done in
I
this
couldn't agree
industry.
with you more, Barb. And if you don't mind me asking something personal, Barb, what would have made the difference for you when you were that young girl in that situation? Like, what did you need that you didn't get?
If anyone, my father, my mother, my boyfriend, anyone had offered to help me keep my child, it would have saved us both. Nobody did. They backed away. It was my problem. And I was very immature. This was back in the early 60s. I'd never lived away from home. I was a college student. Yeah, that might have made a big difference.
It probably would have made all the difference for sure.
Yeah. But yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that's a painful thing to think about. And I know we have Stephanie Joy here, our creative
Yay.
director. Hi,
Hello.
Stephanie. Can you come back?
I'm here.
Yeah, I was thinking this would be a really great time because, you know, we're kind of preaching to the choir with our community because we all have this shared experience. But one of the things that is really important to us at Pulled by the Root is we want to change people's minds in society about this issue, because I think people are literally shocked. They think adoption is a win-win, that there's no problems, it's a social fix, no worries, no big deal, be grateful, everything's fine, let's move on. And that kind of archaic thinking is so very damaging. And one of the special things about our creative director, Stephanie, is that she has been with me every step of the way of this journey. She is a mom of 2 beautiful children, and she recently had an experience of being pregnant. I'm sure the baby heard the podcast the whole entire time. And she gave birth to a gorgeous baby girl. But it's been so amazing with Stephanie to be able to have conversations. She is not adopted, but the way that it has shaped her, she is so fiercely passionate about this subject. And that's what excites me, because we not only need to be excited, but we need other people to come on board and have compassion for this subject, to be able to move it forward in society in a way that change will happen. And we do see some of that. Laws are changing, some things are happening, but we have a real life human being here who is very tightly connected to our community. And, you know, I just wonder if we could just have a little bit of a conversation about that, kind of like we did off camera. Maybe you could share about the difference between giving birth to your first son and then giving birth to your daughter, knowing what you know. Like, you talked to us about having to be separated from your daughter when she wasn't well right after birth.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say thank you guys for having me as a part of this interview. My experience, even though it's not the same, my hope is that it can help other people to understand the fraction of the experience that people are going through still today. So when I found out I was pregnant with my second baby, which I'm still getting used to saying I have 2 children, because it was only a few months ago, Heidi was there to share the experience with me from the day that I found out I was pregnant.
Wow.
To the day that I was on my way to the hospital. I called her on the way to the hospital to tell her that I was going to have my baby. But I thought I had everything planned out. And with my first child, I did not have the birth experience I wanted to have. It was an emergency C-section. I was very unhealthy with preeclampsia, and they took him out because he was no longer growing and he was premature. And it was a pretty scary experience. But with my second baby, I thought, well, this time around, I want to be healthier. This time around, I want to have the birth experience because I may not ever have that again. Didn't work out that way. I had preeclampsia again, got sick again, and they had to take her out. But this time, what I wasn't expecting was the physical response that my body was going to have with this experience. When they took her out, she was having breathing problems. And they reassured me that everything was okay. And I remember the full experience of them, you know, the C-section from start to finish. They take her out. I got to see her, but I never got to hold her. And they took her away, and there was probably about 25 people in the room. And I didn't get to meet her until 16 hours later. And I remember just crying and weeping and crying and feeling like something is physically wrong. I feel like something is physically wrong. My body feels like something is physically wrong. I'm missing something because my body had just carried a baby for, you know, 8.5 months. And not getting to meet her, it gave me this understanding of what a fraction of what that experience would be like and how traumatic that is. And, I was in the entire time I was just completely dissociated from the experience because she wasn't in the room with me. It's been 3 months and I feel like I'm still processing that. You hear all these things, now that don't cut the cord right away, put the baby on your chest right away to help the mother bond with the baby. And there's all these things about that. And I feel like I went through a lot of a grieving period after coming home because I realized I'm never going to have that experience. And, now, I have such a beautiful bond and I'm so thankful. And I don't, I try to just enjoy every exhausted moment, but it was just such an eye-opening experience. My biological dad struggled with addiction and I never knew him. And it wasn't until I was about 8 years old that I realized that I didn't have a relationship with my biological dad. And I had a lot of resentment and anger because I didn't understand how he could reject me or not want me. And so having my daughter, I feel like has already helped me to understand and love myself more. And just that relationship that I have with her already. And my son too, but it's different because I feel like I'm seeing myself in her and I've never seen myself as much as I see through her. And I feel like I'm almost able to understand myself more. I feel like it's so important to share these things, even as a non-adopted person. It's just been healing and just really a blessing for me to hear these stories. So thank you.
Wow.
Well, thank you for sharing, things that we talk about behind the scenes, because I think that, and I'm sure you ladies will all agree, motherhood, it's a primal, it's just so deep and so complicated. And there's all variations of abandonment and different experiences. And I think, I don't want to speak for you, Steph, but I'm sure you imagined what if I were one of those mothers and I would never see that baby again. Potential. That's the kind of horror that kind of pulses through you. And so personally, I really appreciate you sharing something so vulnerable because I think it opens up people's minds.
Thank you.
It's very brave of you that you opened yourself up to all those feelings in that moment.
Yeah, I for one part that I want to circle back to is when I was in the hospital, it was around the time that 16-hour mark when I realized I didn't get to hold my baby on the day of her birth. When that hit me, the realization hit me, the nurse had come in and she could see that there was something wrong. And she was a grandmother herself. And she came up to me. She didn't say anything. She just came up to me and she just held me. She literally just wrapped her arms around me and just held me. And I just bawled. It was just such a beautiful moment that I'm so thankful for her for helping me through that, because when she offered that moment to me, it was incredibly healing for me to be able to just release that. So,
well, and Barb, I'm sure, I don't know what your experience was, but a lot of the mothers that relinquished, they weren't getting that kind of support. It was kind of a shame, just so lonely and so cold. And for baby, I don't know what your experience was, Vicky. For me, I was put away in a crib for 5 days, a little nursery.
Yeah.
And they held up a white sheet so my birth mother wouldn't even know what sex I was. So all she heard was my scream. That's all.
Jeez.
Really, really tough. So I don't know what was your experience like, if you don't mind going into that a little bit.
Me? Oh, yeah. It's a lot of, I know Barb's shaking her head. But she's heard it. It's
a
sad.
horrors.
So I was, after the families backed out that they didn't want me because of my birth defect, I was put in an institution, and I was basically they gave me surgery. So I think I was sedated, and I actually went to hypnotherapy because I had all these feelings of being tied down. And I think when I was an infant, I was tied down a lot and sedated a lot. I had surgeries and an ever rotating shift of nurses who were my caretakers. My mom, who adopted me when they got me when I was 9 months old, she said that I would go to anyone because I didn't recognize anyone as being a parent. So I was just, I would just go to anyone. And I'd never been outside. I'd never seen a picture on the wall. It was like I was an alien baby. She had all these stories about me never being on grass before. Those dogs that come out of the labs that have been in a cage their whole life. I was like that. But I'm really proud of the fact that I was so resilient because one nurse after another came up to my mom and dad and said, if Vicky's spoiled, it's my fault. I would stand in my crib and wave at them. And they would come over and pick me up and carry me around. I found a way to get my needs met. So I was resilient. But it also meant that my first lesson was that I had to earn love. Just being alive wasn't enough. I had to work for it. I had to earn it. So that took a lot of therapy, thousands of dollars of therapy to untangle, right?
Oh, for sure. And I'm so sorry for all the pain that is present amongst this beautiful group of people.
Yeah.
And I think, the hopeful part of all of this is that you're all here.
Yeah.
And that there is a hero's story here, and that there is resilience. And in the middle of hell, you are waving, I still matter.
Yeah.
And I do think it's very important because a lot of us, not just adopted people, but always having to prove our worth.
Yeah.
I think if I had to be honest about my health situation, it was like, do more, keep doing more. It's not enough. It's not enough. And you bypass the messages that your body's saying, could we please take care of ourselves? I think a lot of people are guilty of that. But in the adoption community, I noticed that there's just this, I don't want to say abusive body, but we just go, and try to win love, when honestly, our worth is not about our performance. But boy, that's how I feel. If I don't make the best meal or I don't do the best thing, then I'm not worth being around.
Yeah.
And so I'm so glad that you spoke to that point. And as we begin to wrap up the interview, and I so appreciate you ladies for going into all these vulnerable spaces. There are so many people out there that are hurting, that are trying to sort through this. What can you give them to kind of lift them? Any message of, I know hope is flung around a lot, but encouragement, maybe we go with encouragement today. Something other than go have 2 bottles of wine and drink yourself into an oblivion, like maybe something a little more productive.
I want you to know that you matter. You are perfect and whole exactly as you are.
And I want to tell birth mothers, don't be afraid to search for your child. Be courageous. If you're not courageous now, you're going to regret it. It's no matter how bad it is, knowing the truth, confronting that past is healing And I've learned in my life, when I procrastinate, don't do something, that's a worse torture than facing it. So I really encourage people, don't reject your child a second time. Be courageous. Step forward.
Yeah.
That's so
And
beautiful, ladies.
Yeah. And the more we listen to each other's stories, like Stephanie, thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
when we become victims, it's like a race to the bottom. You are the biggest victim. Who wins the victim award? But when we lift each other up and really like that nurse did, she saw you, she heard you. When we hold each other's pain. So if you're in pain, find someone safe and tell them, someone that can hold you and see you. I think that's very healing. And it can be in many formats.
It can. And just one more thing before we go. When we were doing our session, and Vicky, your voice, first of all, is so gorgeous. Like, you have such a great radio voice. I'm very jealous. It's just so soothing to hear you say, and maybe you can help me remember, but you were telling me you're safe. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything I needed to hear more. And I'm
Wow.
sure there are lots of other people that need to hear that. You are safe. Like, how can we feel safe when all of this turmoil is happening? But you
That's
created
right.
that space.
Yeah. Would you like to hear a little bit of it?
Oh, please. I know our audience would.
So first
Let's
of
do it.
all, pull over if you're driving.
Yes,
Put
please.
yourself in a safe place. And remember that you are an adult now. You are the baby, but you're also the grown-up. So you can hold that baby. And that's right. You can hold that baby. We all have that in common. We were all once a little baby. And we can take a moment and hold that baby. Let that baby lean back into you and let them know it's safe. It's safe to just be. You're safe. The body knows that it's safe, and you know that you can be safe in your body. And if you take time to just settle in each day into this moment and feel the feelings and know that it's all going to be okay because we're here, and that's part of the lesson of living, is to open up and learn and love each other.
Thank you so much, ladies. This was just amazing.
Thank
I
you,
just-
Thank
Heidi.
you, Heidi, for your beautiful work.
Well, and thank you again for the nourishing and the healing that you've provided for us, and I know for our audience. And Stephanie, thank you again for being here and for hanging in there with us every step of the way. So from my heart to yours, thank you.